Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to be talking about Chapter 1, the interpersonal process. More specifically, we are going to be addressing 3 items from this chapter. It is a bit of a lengthy chapter, so just know that half of the chapter we're going over this week, and this is also to kind of get us transitioning into the term. In this video, we are first going to address what is communication. Second, we are going to talk about interpersonal communication and the different characteristics associated with interpersonal communication. And then third, we are going to talk about why we communicate. Number 4 on our preview is actually going to be the transactional communication model, and that's in a completely separate video on our module as well. So we're just going to be going over half of the material from this chapter. So let's go ahead and get started.
What is communication? Now, communication is the process of sending and receiving messages, and this can be both verbal and nonverbal through different mediums. And so you all are communicating something to me, even possibly without your knowledge. So perhaps if I ask you in an email, hey, let me know that you received it, email me back. If you don't, that can communicate something to me. The minute that you step out of your house, you're communicating something. Even if you're not outside of your house, you're still communicating something possibly to your family. Let's say you wake up at 10 when you normally wake up at 7 in the morning. That communicates something to the people who are in your household. We are constantly communicating with others around us. We cannot not communicate. Let me say that again. We cannot not communicate. We are constantly communicating with other people because we have physical needs, we have social needs. We are communicative creatures. We need to communicate. A lot of the time we are communicating unconsciously. We don't intend to communicate certain things, like sitting in a classroom. Sometimes I'll see students yawn. Those nonverbal cues, they are up for interpretation. However, you're sending me some sort of feedback, even if it's not intentional. But communication, it can be verbal, it can be something said out loud like I'm doing right now, or it can also be nonverbal in movements and facial expressions, hand gestures. Those nonverbal cues, they convey a lot. They really, really do. And a lot of the time we're not aware of them. So now that we talked about what is communication, let's talk about what is interpersonal communication. So interpersonal communication is the interaction distinguished by the qualities of uniqueness, interdependence, self-disclosure, and intrinsic rewards. These are 4 specific qualities associated with interpersonal communication, which I'm going to move on to the next one, okay? Don't freak out, right? It's almost the same thing on the 2 different slides, but interaction distinguished by the qualities of uniqueness, interdependence, self-disclosure, and intrinsic rewards. So those are the 4 qualities. Just so y'all know, my cat is like running around here, so if you hear that, it's because of that. So first, we have uniqueness. Think about those close relationships that you have. Maybe you have some handshake with your friend that you've known for 10, 15 years, and it's just such a unique bond and unique friendship that you have with this particular person. You have no other friendships that are like this. You have no other relationships that are like this. It's a unique quality between yourself and another individual that is close to you. Second, we have interdependence. It goes back and forth, whether it is being able to disclose information to that person and them disclose information back, or you being able to help that person and them helping you back as well. It goes back and forth. You are in a sense reliant on one another, and it's not necessarily just like financial or emotional. It's dependent on you and your unique relationship that you have with that person, but there is a sense of interdependence. Just think about like a tug-of-war going back and forth. The tug-of-war would not work if there were not at least one individual on each side. So it's kind of like a tug-of-war going back and forth. There's an interdependence taking place within interpersonal communication. 3, self-disclosure, very, very important. You don't see this too much with someone that you barely meet. You're at work, you have brief conversations maybe with some other people that you work with people like customers, for instance, but are you really self-disclosing information about yourself, like how you're feeling, personal goals, things that are really, really near and dear to you? Are you always self-disclosing information to just random people? Probably Probably not. I mean, some people do feel a little bit more comfortable disclosing information, but usually within interpersonal communication, within interpersonal relationships, you feel very comfortable with that person, where you can disclose certain aspects of your life, certain emotions with them as well. So for instance, an interpersonal relationship that I personally have is with my mom. My mom is very close to me. We're like tied at the waist, but I'm very close with my mother, and we do self-disclose information. Do I self-disclose everything? No. No. But am I in an interpersonal relationship with my mother? Yes, I do have an interpersonal relationship with her. So these are close relationships that we have. This is not just somebody like walking by on the street and then they wave to you and you wave back. That is not interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication are those relationships that hold value to you as a person. And that's what this entire class is about, how to effectively communicate with those individuals who you hold near and dear to you, who matter the most to you. And then finally, we have intrinsic rewards. So you gain something from it. So there's this idea of cost and rewards. We'll talk about the social exchange theory later on, but you get something out of it, whether it's kind of that good feeling of being able to talk to that person, see that person, be around that person. You inherently have some sort of reward from it, whether it's spending time with them, whether it's that they make you happy, you get something out of it. And that's what interpersonal communication is. Again, it's not just some random person that you meet. No. These are the relationships that you hold close and near and dear to you. And it's the development of those relationships as well, because of course, this person that becomes your best friend, you initially start off as acquaintances, and then you get to know one another, and then it builds into a close friendship. And then other things may happen, and we talk about that like in chapter 9, chapter 10, where there's turbulence and relationships end, and it's just so sad. But these are the characteristics associated with interpersonal communication: uniqueness, interdependence, self-disclosure, and intrinsic rewards. So now let's talk about why we communicate. Why do we communicate? Why do we form these close relationships? And so first and foremost, we have physical needs. Communication, it does affect our health. So people who process a negative experience, for instance, by talking about it, they report improved life satisfaction. So this is kind of why support groups exist. Being able to talk about what's going on in your life, any struggles that you're going through that you're trying to overcome. This is why these types of support groups exist, because it helps your physical need. It is a physical need to communicate. Those with stronger networks of family and friends, they tend to live longer. They actually live an average of 3.7 years longer. And so that's not to say that you need to be in constant communication with someone. That's not what I'm trying to say here. That's not necessarily what the text is trying to say either. Not everyone needs the same amount of communication. If you're an introvert, for instance, you might be like, no, Cecilia, like, I like not being around people, and that's okay. You might look at me and see like how I am and think, oh, Cecilia loves people, and I have my moments. Let me just say that. I am a little bit more of an extrovert, but have I always been like this? Definitely not. When I was barely a student at RCC, for instance, many years back, I definitely had a lower need for communication, whether it was with my parents, my friends. And so that's definitely changed over time. So these needs may change over time. They may be more or less, but we do have a physical need to communicate. Next, we have an identity need. So our sense of identity, it comes from the way we interact with other people. And it really depends on your interpretation. I know that some people might have read this section and been like, no, I kind of form my own identity. But also really think about how you grew up, your background, your upbringing. And this is something that I want you to think about for your first paper. Where does your identity come from? Where does your self-concept come from? We'll talk a little bit more about self-concept in a further chapter, but where does this stem from? Does it stem from your environment? There are so many scholars that do believe that who you believe yourself to be is significantly impacted by your environment. And so that's something that many communication scholars do believe, is that you are who you are because of the relationships that you have around you. And so communicating with other people, it does help with your formation of your identity and who you believe yourself to be. Moving on, we have social needs. And so with social needs, just remember communication, it's the principal way relationships are created. You wouldn't have friendships, you wouldn't have anything else without any means of communication. So we are constantly communicating with other people. What's beautiful in this day and age is that we can go online and we can form many friendships online. So if you have a specific interest, you can more than likely find somebody, even if it's not somebody who is around you, but somebody in an online format who may share some similar interests to you. But they help in regards to our social needs as well. Let's go ahead and move on to our final need, which is just our practical needs. If you want to go to a hairdresser and get your hair done, or if you need to make a purchase, letting the plumber, for instance, know, hey, this is what's wrong with my system. I don't know what's going on. And something that I found interesting within the text is that miscommunication in healthcare was linked to 1,700 US deaths. So think about, for those of you who might have a little bit of apprehension when you go to the doctor's office, for instance, that is a practical need that we have, getting our health checked regularly. That's a practical need, letting our doctor know, hey, I haven't been feeling well. And so for many of us, I know myself included, I get a little bit nervous when I do go to the doctor's office and I'm not able to communicate as effectively as I normally am. Sometimes I'll go through and I'll bring my little notebook and I'll jot down everything that I want to discuss with the doctor. And so again, we have physical needs, we have identity needs, we have social needs, and we have practical needs. When it comes to communication, we need communication in our day-to-day life. We do need these relationships, and some of us may have more or less, and we may be satisfied with that more or less, and that's completely fine. We are all unique individuals. Nothing wrong with that.
Alrighty, so let's go ahead and recap. In today's video, we talked about 1, what is communication? 2nd, we talked about interpersonal communication, as well as the different characteristics associated with interpersonal communication. And lastly, we just discussed why we communicate, or different needs associated with communicating. So if you have any questions or concerns about this chapter, please do not hesitate to reach out. Go ahead and send me an email, and we will go ahead and finish up this chapter next week. Just make sure that you check out the other video associated with the transactional communication model.